Hello, archaeologists. Welcome to your flip lesson on the Introduction to Archaeology. Let's get started. What is archaeology? There are clues of the past all around you if you know where to look for them. They can be as small as a human hair or as vast as the Great Pyramids of Egypt. Whatever the size, they help to build up a picture of how people lived long ago. This is what archaeology is all about. People have always left their mark on the world around them. From prehistoric times until present day, they have changed the environment to suit themselves by making tools and homes. These activities all leave traces which can last for hundreds, even thousands of years. Here in the first picture, you see the Temple of Warriors when it appeared to be just a hill. In the second picture, you see it 2 years later after archaeologists began to dig it up. Finally, 4 years later, here it is after excavation was completed. Now we're going to talk about a few important definitions related to archaeology. First, what is archaeology? Well, it's the recovery and study of artifacts, ruins, bones, and fossils that remain from the past. And the archaeologist is the scientist who studies those artifacts, ruins, bones, and fossils. An anthropologist is a scientist who studies the origin, culture, and values of groups of people. Excavation is the process of digging up the remains from the past. It's usually done in a grid pattern, digging approximately 4 inches at a time. We'll talk more about that later. Surviving through the ages. Very few ancient objects have actually survived to the present day. That's why the ones that have lasted are so important for archaeologists. But strangely enough, the same processes that destroy some materials can actually help preserve others. So things that were lost and partly destroyed can survive for the future. Sources of information. So how do archaeologists find their information and how do they analyze it? Well, first, historical archaeology. This is the objects and evidence that are behind the written records and remains. Living history is studying the living people who still use traditional techniques and tools from the past. Written records are written evidence left behind from the past. A primary source is a record that was created at the time of an actual event by someone who saw or participated in that event. Here is an example of a map that was created by somebody during that time period. A secondary source is a source that provides information about an event by someone who is not an eyewitness, but knows about that event. An example would be your social studies book. Dating the artifacts. So how do archaeologists determine how old the artifacts are that they find? Well, historical dating is when an archaeologist will use written records and ancient calendars to determine the age of an artifact. Seasonal dating, not used too often, but it sometimes is, but they use time and seasons to date the objects. Tree ring dating is the most commonly used seasonal method. This is where the rings of a tree can determine how old a tree is. Radioactive dating. This is the most common form of dating objects. Radioactive forms of elements such as carbon and potassium tend to decay, giving off energy and radiation. Each element decays at a certain rate. This rate of decay can be measured and determine about how old an artifact is. Degrees of decay. Almost all things begin to rot or crumble over time. How they decay depends on what they are made of. Microbes are tiny living creatures that eat away at organic materials such as people, plants, animals, and things made of wood. Remember, organic means living. Inorganic materials, such as stone, pottery, metal, and glass, do not rot away in the same way as organic materials. Remember, inorganic means not living. Types of preservation. So, how are things, artifacts, people, plants, animals preserved? There are several ways. One is through different types of weather and conditions. The first one we're going to talk about is extremely hot, dry places, such as deserts or through a volcanic eruption. These situations can help preserve things. No moisture is available to attract microbes that cause the decay. The best known of these remains are mummies, ancient writings, and towns being buried in volcanic ash, such as in Pompeii. Second, damp, soggy places such as bogs, marshes, and mud at the bottom of lakes can preserve organic remains as well. Many microbes cannot survive in these airless conditions. Some of these environments contain strong natural chemicals. These can preserve organic remains as well. One of the most famous bog artifacts is the Tolan man, who was found so intact that his hair, skin, and internal organs were all preserved. Several wounds and a noose around his neck showed that he unfortunately died a violent death. Icy sites. Extremely cold, wet conditions can also preserve things by literally deep freezing them. Destructive microbes can't survive the icy cold. Materials that would normally decay, such as plants, animals, and human remains, can survive frozen for centuries. In 1991, a Neolithic mummy was found frozen on the border of Italy and Austria in the icy mountains. This mummy had been preserved for over 5,300 years. Watery graves. Strong undercurrents in the ocean can quickly bury ships and their contents under a protective blanket of sand. Salty seawater attacks metal but can preserve some organic remains. The Vasa, a famous warship that sank on its maiden voyage in 1628, is one of the most impressive underwater finds. Many artifacts and the ship itself were salvaged, treated, and are now on display. Digging. Excavations uncover many different kinds of archaeological evidence. Faint traces of substances in the soil, outlines of vanished objects, and historical clues help archaeologists decide where to excavate. Layers and dates. Context is the earth around an object and the condition the object is in. Stratigraphy is the idea that over time layers build on one another. The layers farthest down are the oldest. Those farther up are more recent. So as you see at the very bottom in this illustration are stone tools, which would be from early humans. Then as time goes on, more layers continue on top of each other. And on the very most recent layer would be things like soda cans, plastic, glass bottles. Grids. When archaeologists dig, they often begin by dividing the site into large squares like a grid. Each grid is then broken down into subgrids that can be as small as 4 inches. Then the archaeologists begin removing the earth very carefully, layer by layer. The depth of a find is vital to understanding. This is even done at underwater sites. The archaeologist's toolbox. Archaeologists have an array of tools at their disposal to use before, during, and after excavation. The tools they use depend on soil type and how deep it is and the fragility of the artifacts. Once the excavation grid has been established, archaeologists begin digging. Here are some illustrations of actual archaeologists in the field excavating some artifacts, and here's a notebook of an archaeologist's findings. Here are some quick drawings of some of the tools an archaeologist might use. Shovels, picks, brushes, trowels, a wire screen box, measuring tapes, and so on. Here are some pictures that were taken at the La Brea Tar Pits Museum, where you can see archaeologists in action, painstakingly going through and finding very small bits of artifacts and bone from different prehistoric animals, and the work area and their tools. And then here are just some pictures of the La Brea Tar Pits. Check out these cool archaeology sites for more information on archaeology.